Hello, Boston's Real Estate Guru here with the second episode of Homebuyer University. If you are thinking about buying a house, then you're probably really familiar with goals already. You've probably made a goal to stop going to Starbucks for a year so that you can save up to buy a house. You've probably made a goal of, making some personal sacrifices so you could save for your down payment. And that's all great. But now that you're ready to buy the house, you can now set a new set of goals that you'll find to be really helpful. And those are goals for the house. What is it that you want this house to do for you? Is this your forever house? Is this your starter home? Stay here for 5 years max and then move on? Are you just going to buy this house until you get ready to move to another country or whatever? So having an idea of how long you want to stay in the house and what your plans are. You want to fix her up, or you want to add some equity. Do you want to just have a place that's absolutely perfectly move-in ready? All that kind of thinking ahead of time will definitely serve you well when you start your actual home buying process. So that's the first question. What do you want the home to do for you? And that's, like I said, just thinking about what's important, where you're at in that home buying cycle of life. The next thing you want to think about is the size of your house. If you're not already living in a house, and actually even if you are, then you got to kind of think about how you're going to use the house. So maybe right now, like some people say, well, I'm living in my parents' house, so I've got this bedroom. If I can just add on a kitchen and a living room, then I'm all set. But think about your life. Think about storage. You do need a place for skis and kayaks and other like outdoor stuff. Are you a person who has lots of hobbies that are you going to have places to store things? You can very easily outgrow your home if you don't think through about how you're actually going to use it. So definitely. And then also, like, I often think, oh, well, I need to have both. You can go both ways. So you can think, oh, I really need to have a whole big room for, a separate guest room, and then a separate office, and then I need to have an area where I can do my quilting, whatever. Maybe, but maybe not. Think about through the course of the day, could this one room do double duty? Where I am right now is in a closet in my kitchen, which is my office. So in my case, I think just the opposite. Like, what one space can I have that's going to do multiple duties? And that obviously is going to impact the size of the house and whether you need a garage, whether you need a shed, land, whether you could do with a condo. All those sorts of things are really important. And as far as the condo or homeowner piece of it, the big difference, because you figure if you have a townhome, you basically have the whole thing. No one's next to you. No one's above you. You don't have to hear other people's footsteps, unless, of course, someone lives with you. You usually have some kind of a yard, which is semi-private, or some type of a seating area. So it could be that like a townhome is okay for you, but you might feel like, no way, I absolutely have to have a single family home. I have a dog who needs to run in the yard, or I have to have, I just really need to have that space. I like to garden, whatever. Or you could say, hey, this is just my starter place. I just want to have 4 walls and a stove. I don't really care that much about the stove. I just need 4 walls and a microwave, whatever. So those sorts of things, when you think about the size, obviously in general, there's a correlation between the square footage or the size of the home and how much you're going to pay for it. So take that into consideration. And then the next piece that adds into that is where. That's another huge factor in cost. So if you think that this is, okay, so here's something to think about. In general, areas that have a well-ranked school system tend to be more expensive. If you don't have kids in school, there's no reason for you to pay extra to live in this community where homes are more expensive because of the fantastic school system. An example here in the Boston area is Brookline. Brookline has a school. People literally send their kids to Brookline school system from all over the world. So you're competing with all those people when you need to buy a house there. Just over the border in Brighton, where you're going to have access to all the same, same proximity to the city, or maybe even closer, same proximity, same restaurants, same everything. You'll pay an average of $40,000 to $50,000 less minimum just by crossing the border. If you don't care about the school system, you don't really need to be right in the heart of this community where you're going to pay a premium for that. On the other hand, if you're going to have kids in the school system, then that's something that you do want to think about. So when you start thinking about your where, I would encourage you to also consider some communities that you maybe aren't very familiar with. You can search for things that you like to do or types of restaurants that you like to have, and maybe find some communities if you're flexible as to your location, and like spend a whole weekend in that community. Like go there, walk the streets, meet the people, try the restaurants, and see if it feels good to you. See if it feels like, hey, this is pretty cool. I like the vibe here, because there are some places that are kind of up and coming or just starting to come into their own power. And you might not have heard about them yet. You might be chasing sort of some past stuff. Like a good example of that is JP. So Jamaica Plain, which is part of Boston, is an area where I would say maybe 5 years ago, it was just like a whole bunch of single people. I mean, obviously there were other people, but there was a lot of single people moving into JP. It was a real vibe. Everybody was like traveling and biking and doing all this kind of stuff. And it was a really, quite young, active place. But as inevitably happens, some of those people started to get old. Well, all those people started to get older. Some of them paired up and they started getting married and having kids. And now when you go to JP, there's like baby strollers all over the place. So that's, a change in the community. And that if you were thinking that you were going to live there and like get plugged into all these people who were like active and traveling and doing all kinds of stuff, you might be surprised to find yourself like surrounded by baby strollers. Not that it's a bad thing. It just might not be the vibe that you were hoping for. So where's the next JP? Where's the next place where, like, for example, if you wanted that vibe where artsy, single, active people are hanging out now? Well, it's someplace else. So take some time and surprise yourself with some communities that you thought you knew about that you maybe didn't. The next thing you need to think about, of course, is money. How much per month are you comfortable spending on your housing? Now, an easy way to do this is how much you're paying for rent plus how much you're saving. But some people make the mistake of saying, oh, well, when I get pre-approved, the mortgage person is going to tell me how much I can afford. I don't like that approach, because you could end up in a place where you feel very uncomfortable. You could end up in a place where if one thing happens, like, say there's a pandemic and you can't work for 6 or 8 or 10 weeks or months, you don't want to be in a situation where you're going to lose your house. You want to still be able to save. You want to still be able to have vacations. You want to still have fun, especially like right now. This is 2021, and we are pretty much very close to the top of the market. So it's not like if you would have bought 7 years ago and you would watch your house appreciate every month. Right now, your house is probably just going to stay at the same value. It might even decrease a little bit. So you're not going to have a lot of equity right away. So just take those things into consideration when you're thinking about how much per month you're comfortable paying for your house. Now, again, that's going to differ. If you get a condo, you've got your condo fees to think about. If you've got a bigger house, then there's more taxes. So each house, might be different. You might say, oh, well, this house is in a town where the taxes are lower, so I can actually afford a little bit more house, a little bit more expensive house in this community versus this other community where the taxes are a little bit higher, or this condo complex where the condo fees are a little higher, whatever. So all that, is monthly income versus this is the number, this is the amount that I can afford for a house. Oh, I can afford a $500,000 house. Maybe it's better to say, oh, I can afford a $3,000 a month mortgage or $3,000 a month housing cost. The next thing you want to think about is amenities. So while you're listing out all your great things, people think, oh, well, they think about the big things. I really want a garage, which is great. And that's important. But what about closet space? And what about a dishwasher? And what about, a certain amount of, I was thinking of something else that was really earth shattering. But anyway, it doesn't matter. Like the kinds of things, and a good way to start adding to your amenities list is when you go to houses, like, note the things that are really important to you. Like, oh, this house had a finished basement and I hadn't thought about that, but that's really something I want. So that goes on the list. oh, this house had a yard that was already fenced in already for my dog. Well, that can go on the list. A fireplace can go on the list. And you might find that you have to compromise at some point, but at least at the beginning, know what's important to you so you can kind of like have your checklist when you go and look for stuff. And then the last thing to try to think about is the future. What is going to happen in the future? Do you think you're going to stay here for 5 years? Do you think you're going to stay here for, like my friend bought her house and said, they're taking me out of here feet first. This is my last house. Where is this house on that trajectory for you? And the reason that's important is because if you think you're going to sell pretty soon, you have to kind of be a little more cognizant of market cycles. Whereas if you expect to be taken out feet first, it's not really going to matter anything about market cycles. So anyway, that is it for goals. Be sure to tune in next week when we're going to talk about something else. Let me see what it is. Oh, getting the money, getting pre-approved. Okay. So thank you so much for tuning in, and see you later.